Eliza wasn't sure why she said yes to Rachel's birthday party. Maybe it was the way her friend insisted. Or maybe she just didn't want to spend another Friday night with her phone and the distant hum of the refrigerator as her only company. Rachel's house was already buzzing by the time Eliza arrived. Laughter spilled out through the open windows, warm light glowing inside. She hesitated at the door, then knocked gently. Too gently, probably, because no one heard. A second later, the door swung open anyway. "Eliza," Rachel threw her arms around her. "You came." "I did." Eliza smiled awkwardly, tugging at the hem of her dress. "Happy birthday." Inside, the living room was filled with people Eliza mostly didn't know. The music was mellow, the lights dimmed. A string of fairy lights blinked above the kitchen doorway. And someone was already pouring tequila shots at the counter. Toby, Rachel's boyfriend, gave her a wave from across the room. "Grab a drink. We're doing karaoke later, whether you like it or not." Rachel led her to the kitchen. "Wine? Beer? Something stronger?" "Wine's good." As Rachel poured, Eliza's eyes wandered to the corner of the living room. Emma stood half leaning against the back of the couch, one hand wrapped around a bottle of dark beer. He wasn't talking to anyone, just watching the room with quiet amusement. Broad shoulders, relaxed posture, blue-grey eyes under a slightly furrowed brow. Eliza blinked and looked away quickly. "That's Nick," Rachel said, following her gaze. "Toby's friend. Just moved into the area a couple weeks ago. He looks reserved." "He is, but he's not cold. Just doesn't waste words. You'd probably like him." Eliza gave a neutral shrug and sipped her wine. Later, after 2 glasses and a reluctant half-dance to an 80s pop song, she found herself out on the back patio. The night air was cooler than expected, with a soft breeze brushing against her bare shoulders. She wasn't alone. Nick stood near the railings, smoking something slim and dark. He glanced at her once, then returned his gaze to the trees. "Nice night," he said. His voice surprised her, low and clear, like smooth stones in water. "Yeah," she replied, stepping closer. "Needed some air." He nodded, flicked ash from the end of his cigarette. "I saw you arrive. You seemed like you weren't sure about coming in." She smiled, almost despite herself. "I wasn't." "I get that." They fell into silence, not uncomfortable. Eliza studied his profile. His jaw was lined with a faint stubble. And when he turned slightly, the porch light caught in his eyes. "You live nearby?" she asked. "Just a few blocks over, near Dawson and 4th. She raised her eyebrows. "Me too." A small smile pulled at his lips. "Small world." From inside came a shout. Toby trying to get everyone's attention for karaoke. Rachel's laughter rang through the open patio door. Eliza looked toward it, then back at Nick. "You escaping too?" "I'm a bad singer," he said, "and I like quiet." Her lips curled. "Same." A minute passed, then 2. "You want another drink?" he asked. "I'm okay for now." Nick nodded and didn't push it. The moment stretched between them, warm and full of things unsaid. Eventually, Eliza excused herself and slipped back inside, feeling the heat of his eyes follow her. The party started to fade after midnight. People filtered out in pairs or small clusters, heels in hands, jackets draped over arms, voices dropping to tired murmurs. Eliza lingered in the kitchen, half watching Toby and Sean argue over what qualified as a classic movie, her glass of wine long since emptied. Rachel had disappeared upstairs with Ava, giggling about something neither of them would remember in the morning. Eliza felt pleasantly buzzed, not drunk, but her body was heavy with the weight of too many glances, too much noise. She slipped out to the front porch, hoping for a last breath of cool air before calling a cab home. Nick was already there, sitting on the top step, one knee bent, arms resting lazily over his legs. She hesitated. He turned his head. "Didn't expect to see you again tonight," he said. "I could say the same." She stepped down beside him, careful not to let her dress catch on the splintered wood. "I thought you'd ghost out early." "I almost did," he said, glancing at her. "But I figured I'd see if you came back out." Eliza raised an eyebrow. "Waiting for me? Maybe." She didn't know what to do with that, so she did nothing, just sat beside him in the quiet, listening to the distant hum of passing traffic and the occasional burst of laughter from inside. "Do you always watch people at parties?" she asked after a moment. "Only the interesting ones." She snorted, trying not to smile. "That sounds like a line." "It's not." They sat in silence again, but this one felt different. Not like strangers. Not like acquaintances either. It was the kind of silence that hummed just beneath the surface, like two radio stations tuned too close together. Nick tilted his head back, looking up at the stars, barely visible through the orange haze of city light. "I don't go out much," he said, "but Toby insisted. I've known him since college." "You don't seem like the party type." "I'm not." He looked at her. "Are you?" "Not really," she admitted. "Rachel made me. Said I was gathering dust." Her words. "She's not wrong," he said, a faint grin playing at the corner of his mouth. "Excuse me?" "You've got that look, like someone who spends too much time inside their own head." Eliza gave him a look, half amused, half defensive. "And what about you?" "I live there permanently," he replied, tapping his temple. That made her laugh. A soft, unexpected sound that seemed to settle between them like something delicate. A car pulled up down the street, headlights sweeping across the yard. "I should probably go," she said, not moving. Nick didn't move either. "I could walk you." She turned to him. "It's late." "I don't mind." There was a beat of hesitation. Then she nodded. They walked in silence for the first block, the kind that didn't beg to be filled. Their footsteps matched pace, arms occasionally brushing. The night had cooled, and Eliza felt the edge of it against her bare skin. "So what do you do?" she asked. "Freelance photography," he said. "Mostly portraits. Sometimes architecture. It pays the bills." "Do you like it?" "I like being behind the lens," he said. "I don't like being seen." She looked at him. "But you're here, at a party, talking to someone." "Exceptions," he said quietly. "Rare ones." Her cheeks warmed. She wasn't sure if it was the wine or the words. When they reached her building, she paused at the gate. Nick stood beside her, his hands in his pockets, the porch light casting shadows on his face. "This is me," she said. "I figured." She looked at the steps, then back at him. Thanks for walking me. He nodded once, slowly. You're welcome. Something shifted then, maybe in the way he looked at her, or the way she didn't step back. Their faces were inches apart. His eyes weren't asking, just waiting. Her breath caught, and then her phone buzzed in her purse. She blinked, the moment cracking like glass underfoot. Rachel's name flashed on the screen. Sorry, she murmured, stepping back. I should. Yeah, he said quickly, taking a step too. Get inside safe. She nodded and turned, unlocking the gate with trembling fingers. Halfway up the stairs, she glanced back. He was still there, watching, unreadable. She went inside and leaned against the closed door, heart beating too fast for what hadn't even happened, but almost did. 3 nights passed without a word. Eliza tried to forget the way Nick had looked at her, the way his voice dropped when he stood too close. She buried herself in small tasks, watering the plants, organizing old emails, wiping down already clean countertops. But the silence of her apartment seemed deeper now, like something was missing. Not noise, but presence. Late Thursday night, as she lay in bed reading, the quiet broke. A sound, muffled but unmistakable, filtered through the wall that bordered her bedroom. A breathy moan, then the soft rhythm of movement. She froze, book still in hand. It was Nick's place. She could hear the thump of his bed frame against the wall, the low masculine growl of his voice, words too blurred to make out, but intimate, urging. Another moan followed, higher this time, feminine, pleading. Eliza sat up slowly, her pulse quickening. She knew she should turn on music, distract herself, leave the room even. But she didn't. Instead, she listened. The noises weren't loud. They weren't vulgar. They were slow, aching, intimate, deliberate. The kind of sounds people made when nothing else existed in the world but skin and breath and hands. She pressed her thighs together, suddenly too aware of her own body. Her fingers gripped the blanket. The moans grew faster, then silence, then a gasp, then nothing. Just the faint creak of bed springs and the eventual click of a lamp or switch being turned off. Eliza let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She stared at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come. The next morning, she opened her door just as Nick opened his across the narrow breezeway. Their eyes met. He was wearing a dark t-shirt, camera slung over one shoulder, hair still slightly damp. He looked exactly the same, and yet somehow different. Her cheeks warmed instantly. Did he know she'd heard? Hey, he said casually. Hi. You okay? His brow furrowed slightly. She forced a smile. Yeah, you? He hesitated, then nodded. Working today. Long shoot downtown. She stepped aside to let him pass, but he didn't move right away. Instead, he looked at her, really looked, and something flickered in his eyes. Not surprise, not guilt, recognition. She swallowed. Well, have a good day. You too. That evening, Rachel called. You've been quiet. I've been working. Eliza lied. Rachel wasn't fooled. You're brooding, which means something happened. Eliza hesitated. Nothing happened. Liar, Rachel said with a smirk in her voice. Is it Nick? Why would you say that? Because you're predictable. And because Ava said she saw you and Nick looking dangerously compatible at my party. Eliza rolled her eyes. Ava sees chemistry in every direction. Doesn't mean she's wrong. Eliza didn't answer. Rachel's tone softened. Just don't overthink everything. He seems like a good guy. Maybe, Eliza murmured. Maybe not. That night, she dreamed of him. She was standing in his doorway, wrapped in shadows. He stepped toward her, bare-chested, hand reaching for her face. He didn't say anything, just touched her, gently, as if she might disappear. His lips brushed her neck, her shoulder, lower, her breath hitched. She woke up sweating, tangled in her sheets, heart pounding. Her phone buzzed. Nick. Sorry if it was loud last night. She stared at the message, blinking. Eliza. It's fine. A pause. Nick. You sure? Her fingers hovered over the screens. She typed, deleted, typed again. Eliza. Thin walls. Nick. Noted. Another pause. Then, Nick. Should I keep the volume down? Or are you just mad it wasn't you? Eliza's breath caught in her throat. Her reply came slower, more cautious. Eliza. Maybe I'm mad I cared at all. His answer came instantly. Nick. You listened. She stared at the words, feeling heat bloom in her chest and slip lower. Eliza. You wanted me to? Nick. No. Then a second message. Nick. But I hoped you would. The next evening she stood outside his door, heart hammering. Not even sure how she got there. She raised her hand to knock, then paused. What did she even want? But the door opened before she touched it. Nick stood there, shirt half buttoned, as if he'd been getting dressed to leave. He froze when he saw her. Eliza. She began, then faltered. I wasn't going to. He stepped back silently, giving her space to enter. She didn't move. You don't have to come in, he said, voice quieter now. But I won't pretend I don't think about it. She looked at him, uncertain, every nerve alive and aching. I don't want to be just one of your nights, she said softly. You wouldn't be. Her lips parted. You said that before. He stepped closer. No, I said I hoped you listened. That's not the same. She looked up at him, into that still, steady gaze, and for the first time she didn't look away. The storm came in suddenly. A thick wall of clouds rolled in over the rooftops late Saturday afternoon, dimming the sky to an early dusk. Eliza stood at her window, watching the wind whip the trees into a slow frenzy. The first raindrops hit hard against the glass, then turned into a steady downpour. She didn't mind the rain. It gave her an excuse to stay in. Wrapped in a soft cardigan, barefoot, she wandered the kitchen aimlessly, waiting for the kettle to boil. She kept glancing at her phone, though no messages came. It had been 2 days since their text exchange, and neither of them had made a move since. The water boiled. She poured her tea, curled up on the couch and tried to read, but her eyes kept losing the line. Her thoughts were thick with him, his voice, his mouth, the way he looked at her like he knew exactly what she was feeling, even when she didn't. A knock startled her. She turned, heartbeat instantly quickening. Another knock, firmer this time. She crossed the living room and opened the door. Nick stood there, soaked from the rain, water dripping from his hair and sliding down the curve of his jaw. His dark t-shirt clung to him, revealing the outline of lean muscle beneath. "Power's out at my place," he said simply, breathless from the sprint through the storm. "I was going to head to a friend's, but I saw your lights were still on." She blinked. "You want to come in?" He hesitated. "Only if you want me to." A beat passed. Then she stepped back. "Come in." He did, carefully shaking water from his shoulders. She watched him, pulse racing. He looked different in the dim light of her apartment. More real, more vulnerable. Something flickered in her chest. Not fear. Something warmer. Something that melted her caution a little more. "I can get you a towel," she offered. "Thanks." She disappeared into the bathroom, hands trembling slightly, returned with a clean towel and handed it to him. He took it, brushing her fingers. A simple touch, but it sent a shiver down her spine. "Tea?" she asked. "I'd love some." They sat across from each other, mugs in hand, steam curling in the air between them. The storm outside roared against the windows, but in the room it was still, quiet, tense. Nick set down his cup. "I've thought about you," he said, eyes fixed on hers, "every night since Rachel's party." Eliza swallowed. "Me too." "I didn't bring anyone over after that first night," he said. "You should know." "I didn't ask." "You didn't have to." Silence again. But this one was brimming. Electric. "I'm not good at slow," he admitted, voice low. "Not when I want something." Her breath caught. "What do you want?" His gaze dropped to her mouth. "You." She set her mug down. They stared at each other until something gave way. He moved first, crossed the room in 2 steps. She stood to meet him. Their mouths met in a sudden aching kiss, hot, desperate, full of everything they hadn't said. His hands framed her face, fingers sinking into her hair. She clung to his shoulders, breath catching against his lips. They broke apart once, barely. "Eliza," he murmured, his voice rough. "Tell me to stop, and I will." She shook her head, eyes wide. "Don't." He kissed her again, slower this time. His hands found her waist, pulled her close until their bodies pressed together. She felt the hard line of him through his jeans, the heat rolling off his skin. He lifted her gently, and her legs wrapped around his hips, without hesitation. She laughed softly into his neck as he carried her toward the bedroom, her cardigan slipping off her shoulders. Rain drummed harder against the windows, thunder rolling distantly. He laid her down on the bed as if she was something fragile, something precious. His hands moved carefully, pulling her shirt over her head, tracing the curve of her collarbone, brushing down the sides of her ribs like he was learning her by touch alone. Her fingers trembled as she undid the buttons on his shirt. Beneath his skin was warm, smooth, slightly damp. She kissed down his chest, tasting the storm on his skin. They moved slowly at first, unrushed, exploratory. Her breaths came faster, his hands growing bolder. They shed layers of caution as easily as they shed clothes. His mouth on her neck made her gasp. His fingers trailing down her spine made her arch. When he finally pressed inside her, it was with a groan that shook something deep in her chest. They moved together as if they'd done it before in another life, falling into rhythm without thought. Eliza gripped the sheets, back arched, eyes locked with his. There was heat, yes, hunger, but something more tender under it, something careful. He kissed her lips, her cheek, her temple, over and over, like he was anchoring her in place. And when she came, it wasn't loud. It was quiet. A sharp gasp, a soft cry, a clutch of fingers and breath. He followed moments later, face buried in the crook of her neck. They stayed like that, tangled and panting, for a long time. The storm raged on. Inside, it was quiet. Morning light filtered through the blinds, casting faint golden lines across the tangled sheets. Eliza stirred, the warmth of a body beside hers anchoring her in that hazy space between sleep and waking. Nick's arm was draped around her waist. His breathing was steady, the heat of his chest against her back grounding and impossibly intimate. For a few moments, she just lay there, still, safe. It had been so long since she'd let anyone this close. Physically, emotionally. Something about last night had opened her, like a window left ajar in a storm. But now, with daylight softening the edges of the night, doubts began to creep in again. What did this mean? What was she now to him? She carefully slipped out from under his arm and sat on the edge of the bed, pulling the blanket around her. Nick stirred behind her. "Hey." His voice was rough, sleep-heavy. "You okay?" She nodded, not turning around, just thinking. He sat up, hair tousled, eyes still soft with sleep. "Too fast?" Eliza exhaled. "No, just unexpected." He leaned forward and pressed a kiss to her bare shoulder. "It wasn't just a night, Eliza." She turned to him, searching his face. "I'm not good at saying things I don't mean," he added. She believed him. Still, something in her heart twisted. Old fears, sharp-edged. Later that afternoon, Eliza met Rachel at their usual cafe. The rain had stopped, and everything smelled like wet leaves and concrete. Rachel arrived 5 minutes late, sunglasses perched on her head, despite the overcast sky. "You look different," she said, sliding into the seat across from Eliza. "Do I?" "Relaxed. Or..." Rachel squinted, saw. Eliza blushed. Rachel gasped. "You did? With Nick?" Eliza tried to shush her, glancing around. Rachel grinned like a cat. "Was it amazing?" "It was amazing, right?" Eliza rolled her eyes, but a smile tugged at her lips. "It was unexpected." "I knew it," Rachel said smugly. "There's something about him. He's so quiet, but in a dangerous way. Like he sees everything." Eliza sipped her latte. "Yeah, that's exactly how it feels." They talked for a while. About work, about Sean's latest dating disasters, about Ava getting a modeling gig in LA. Eliza started to relax, until Rachel looked up and suddenly stopped mid-sentence. "What?" Eliza asked. Rachel tilted her chin. "Don't look yet. But that woman who just walked in? The brunette in the leather jacket? That's Emily." Eliza froze. Emily. Nick's ex. Eliza's heart thudded. She turned her head slowly. The woman was beautiful, effortlessly so. Sharp cheekbones, smoky eyeliner, the kind of confidence that drew eyes without asking. She scanned the cafe, then locked eyes with Eliza, and smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. "She's trouble," Rachel muttered. "Always was." Emily ordered her coffee and leaned casually against the counter, still watching Eliza. Then, as she walked past their table, she slowed just enough to speak. "You must be Eliza," she said sweetly. "I've heard so much." Eliza blinked. "From Nick?" Emily's smile widened. "From Nick and others." And then she was gone. Heels clicking on the tile. Eliza stared at the door long after it closed. That evening, she stood in her apartment, arms crossed, pacing. She didn't want to text him. She didn't want to look like she cared. But the knots in her stomach told her she did. Eventually, she walked across the breezeway and knocked. Nick opened the door, surprised. "Hey." "Emily came to the cafe today." His expression darkened just slightly. "Did she say anything to you?" "She said she's heard a lot about me." Nick sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "She's not subtle." "She also said she's back in town." "For now," he said. "She's not here for me." "But you didn't tell me she was even around." "I didn't think she'd matter." Eliza folded her arms tighter. "She does, because she clearly knows about me." "She probably asked Toby," he said. "Or Ava?" Eliza hated the heat in her chest. Jealousy. Insecurity. "Were you too serious?" He paused. "We lived together, a couple years back." She tried not to react. "It ended badly," he added. "She cheated, multiple times." Eliza looked away. "I don't want her, I want you." She believed him, and still, it sat uneasily in her chest. "I need time," she said finally. "I'll give you space," he said softly. "But I won't pretend I don't want more." She nodded, then turned and walked back to her place. Her phone buzzed 5 minutes later. "Nick, I'm not good at this, but I want to try, with you." She didn't reply, but she didn't delete the message either. Eliza didn't answer Nick's message that night. She read it, more than once. The words burned gently in the center of her chest. Not the kind of fire that scorched, but the kind that lingered. Steady, glowing, patient. Still, she didn't respond. The next day passed in a blur of distractions. She ran errands she didn't need to run, called her sister just to hear another voice. Every time she opened her phone, the unread message stared back at her like an invitation she couldn't bring herself to accept. Not yet. That night, she stood at her bedroom window and stared into the dark. Nick's apartment was quiet. Lights off. She wondered where he was. Out with friends, maybe. Or just giving her the space she'd asked for. The thought brought a strange ache. Not jealousy. Not quite. Something more like missing him. It was nearly midnight when she heard the soft knock. Not rushed. Not urgent. She opened the door. Nick stood there, hands in his pockets, hair a little messy, eyes unreadable in the low hallway light. "I know I said I'd wait," he said quietly. "And I meant it. But I also can't pretend I don't think about you. Every hour." She swallowed hard, standing still. "You don't owe me anything," he continued, "but I didn't want to leave it like that. Not if you're hurting, not if I can help." Eliza stepped aside without a word. He walked in slowly, like crossing into something sacred. She closed the door behind him. For a moment, they stood facing each other. No kisses, no reaching, just breath. Then she finally spoke. "I wanted to reply," she said. "I just didn't know how." "You don't have to explain." "I think I do." Her voice trembled slightly. "I've been on my own for a long time. Not just without someone. Without trust. Without softness. You being kind to me. Being honest. It's terrifying." He stepped closer. Not touching her. Not yet. "I'm terrified too," he said. "I don't do this often, this closeness, letting someone in." She looked up at him. "But you want to?" He nodded. "With you, yeah, I do." She reached out, her fingers curling around his shirt. "Then don't stop." And just like that, everything cracked open. His mouth was on hers. Not desperate, but sure. Anchored. The kind of kiss that didn't need to ask for anything. The kind that answered everything. He backed her toward the couch slowly, hands slipping under her sweater, lifting it over her head. She let him undress her piece by piece until she stood before him in nothing but the soft golden light of her living room. "You're beautiful," he said, voice husky. "So are you," she whispered back, and meant it. He kissed her collarbone, her shoulders, every inch of skin like a promise. She helped him out of his clothes, and when their bare bodies pressed together, it was like the last barrier dissolved. This time, there was no rush. They moved together slowly, reverently. His hands found hers. Their fingers tangled and stayed that way, even as their bodies found a rhythm. She closed her eyes, letting herself fall into the warmth of it. The safety of his weight, the quiet murmurs he made when she moaned his name. No masks, no fear. Just breath and skin and something that felt like beginning. When it was over, they lay on the couch, tangled in the throw blanket, her head on his chest. His heartbeat was steady beneath her cheek. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Neither did he. In the morning, sunlight painted the room in pale amber. Eliza woke slowly, blinking against the light. Nick was already awake, still beside her, hair a mess, one hand gently stroking the curve of her back. "Hi," she whispered. He smiled. "Hi. Do you want coffee?" He nodded. "If you're making it." She stood, wrapping herself in a robe. He sat up and watched her move through the kitchen like she belonged there. Like this was already their morning routine. It wasn't, but it didn't feel like the first time either. It felt right. 2 mugs clinked softly on the table. They sat across from each other in silence, but not the uncertain kind. This was the quiet Eliza had always craved. Not absence, not loneliness, but presence, peace. She looked up at him. "So what now?" He reached across the table and took her hand. "Whatever we want." She squeezed his fingers, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't think about what could go wrong. She thought about what could begin.